Enlightened World Network. Thank you for joining us today. We are here with Deb Goldberg for Divine Relationship Recovery. And if you've been watching for the last couple of weeks, Deb has done a brilliant job of starting to really outline for us the importance of connection with our Creator in our current relationships. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. So with that, Deb, I'm so pleased that you are choosing to do this show on Enlightened World. So you just take it away.
Oh, well, thank you, Ruth. I really appreciate being able to provide this service because I do feel like it is a service, and it has been my purpose to bring to light what I have been given to share. And so I want to start off just by saying and clarifying that what I'm sharing on this show are actually wisdom that has come through God, Jesus, angels, divine love, however you want to call, whatever you want to call divine love, I call it God. And it is about my story and who I am. Each one of us are going to have our own relationship with divine love, and you're going to have your own truth. So what I'm sharing with you is the truth that I've been given. And you, as you go along with your relationship with divine love, you're going to be taught what you need to know for your specific journey. So I just wanted to clarify that with everyone so that they know that I'm speaking my truth, not everybody's truth. And I think that's really important. But my truth might help you in understanding what your time here is about. So today we're going to talk about the belief in separation from God and how that affects all of our relationships. And we're also going to talk about who are we, looking at it through myths and metaphors, because that is really how we understand life, because none of us really understand the truth of how all of this miracle life works. We're building a foundation here. I started the first show with building a divine foundation, understanding the role of divine love in and how it affects your relationships and transformation. And the second show was about allowing divine love to nurture you through this union of oneness so that you can come from a full heart rather than lack into all of your relationships and find them much more fulfilling. Before we get started on today's discussion, and it's going to get pretty metaphysical, and so I'm going to talk on two different levels of how I understood life, the myth I understood when I first woke up, and then what it's turned into, and it's become very metaphysical. I'd like to do a little meditation just to ground ourselves. So let's just take a moment and close our eyes and breathe in through your nose slowly and deeply, and release your breath out through your mouth the same way. Each session that I do, I have been setting an intention for expansion of our heart space and our mind. And we want to allow divine love in and let it hold you in great joy and love, knowing that you're willing to be present in this moment and maybe hear things that actually help guide you in your journey back to love, returning home to love, returning home to divine love. So keep breathing in with more expansion, feeling the love within you. You can put your hand on your heart and notice your breathing, how it expands each time you take a deep breath in and breathe it out, that it gets more peaceful within. Divine love wants you to know that it is walking beside you, it is within you, it is you. And that you are perfect where you are right in this very moment, in every moment. I ask people to take notes because it's easy to go back then to something that you might have heard that you want to process some more. And sometimes the things that we talk about as we're opening and expanding our heart and mind, it is confusing. So taking notes really helps with that, and that you can go back and ask your own guides to help you in your understanding of what is true for you. When you're ready, open your eyes and come back to the present moment. Okay, so let us start with the belief in separation. I believe that just taking on this, what I call an incarnation, is setting you up to forget that you are pure divine love, that nothing else exists. And it's actually purposeful. Because if you remembered who you were all the time, you wouldn't be having some of the experiences that you're having. And I don't want to call it a game, but on some level, sometimes it does feel that way as you keep going along and understanding the whole miracle of life. So the belief in separation started as we took on the incarnation and we were born into human form. And with that separation means that you forget the source of your being, the source of your heart, the source of who you are, divine consciousness. Divine consciousness is the substance of everything. So when you forget that you are part of God, one with God, it creates a lot of stress for people, and it causes a lot of angst and a lot of fear. And so part of our purpose here is understanding that we are returning to love, returning to actually who we truly are, that we are divine love expressing itself in physical form. And for a lot of people, they haven't heard that before, and other people are aware of that. So I'm going to be talking on a couple of different levels because I believe that on our show, we might have people that are just beginning to wake up, and not everybody uses that term waking up. Waking up means that all of a sudden you've had an expansion in your mind and heart, and you start seeing things very differently than you did before. You stop becoming much more aware of things than you were before. So, Ruth.
Yes, Deb.
I'm bringing you in here. And we talked about this, that both of us, when we woke up, when we first started to wake up, and did you understand that you were waking up, that you were waking up from like a great sleep or being tied into the earth world and knowing that there's something else different out there?
I was aware that there was something different out there that I was experiencing. And I was aware that nobody I knew was experiencing it. So it felt to me like I had entered some minority group somehow. But then in meditation, I would be shown me in a vast field with many, 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 many souls. So I knew that I was connected to a larger group, but I didn't know them in person.
Mhm. Yeah. And so waking up can be different for each person, but a lot of times you don't always know what you're experiencing, or that it's an awakening process. And actually, it's awakening process to your own self of who you truly are. It's not that we're transforming into something more, we're transforming back into our original state of being.
Right. It felt like coming home.
Mhm.
It wasn't foreign.
Mm-mm.
Really, it was so warm and so welcoming. And my heart knew all of these other souls. It really was coming home for me.
Mhm. Yeah, it feels absolutely wonderful. Thank you. So, waking up, I woke up after 56 years. That's when Jesus woke me up in a meditation. And all I knew of life was what was in front of me. I was so tied into the earth world, my work, family, friends, and I always knew that there was a God. I didn't know how to conceptualize that. I didn't know how to have a relationship with it, but I prayed to God often. So when Jesus woke me up and it was like, whoa, what's this? I don't understand what this is. What is going on? And he started eventually bringing me all of this wisdom that he wanted me to learn um, about divine love, about who God was and who I was and who the rest of the world is and what we're doing here. So and of course, one of my beliefs was I I thought there was some kind of separation between myself and divine love, and taking on this incarnation. I think maybe as a baby we probably come in remembering that the oneness and knowing that oneness, and then as we keep growing, we get more indoctrinated into the earth world, into the illusion. So, one of the things that Jesus taught me was a myth, a way to understand who I was, because I was driving around in my car and I would drive to work and I'd look up in the sky and I'd say, who are we? We live on a planet in a solar system in this gigantic universe, and it sounds like a sci-fi movie and nobody questions it. Nobody says, who am I? I live on a planet. What am I? Right? That this doesn't make sense. And so I spent a lot of time questioning that. And of course, then I started to learn that we're spirit having a human experience. And so that's a common understanding for most people who have started the process of awakening and remembering. And so I was given this myth, and this is not an uncommon myth, other people have heard it before, is that we decided with God that we're playing a role on Theater Earth. And each one of us have our own individual movie. We are the movie star in this movie. And then there's an Earth story. There's a whole story about the collective Earth, and that we're involved in that as well. So he said that each one of us are making decisions, that there's a storyline that we follow. The story's already been written. We helped with all of these things. And then we actually chose supporting actors to help us play out this role, this story, this movie that we're in, or theater production, whatever you want to call it, whatever resonates with you. And so we are we've set this whole grand story up, and then we get born. We picked our parents, we picked everybody to awaken us. Everybody's playing a role, and we're playing a role as a supporting actor in other people's stories. So this was a beginning myth for me to start understanding a little bit more of who I was, and that what I'm doing here. And Jesus explained to me that, because I said, well, why do we do this? I don't understand. Because sometimes I don't think it's fun. And and I've gone through experiences like a lot of other people that felt more like a nightmare in my younger years. So he said that God wants us to do this, and that it's really supposed to be experiential, and it's supposed to be fun, because we get so serious and tied into all of the earth world that we really forget to laugh, and we forget to have fun, and we don't realize the miracle process that we're involved in. So Ruth, when you woke up, was there some kind of story that you understood too about waking up?
Very similar, Deb, that what I was taught was that before we come into this lifetime, we meet with our, what some of my friends call their soul peeps, right? The souls that they continue to connect with life after life. And you determine who's going to be in your lifetime, what role are they going to play, how are they going to help you learn something. And those relationships are not always what we would think to be positive, because we all know that we learn so much more when things are tough. We don't learn when things are easy, right? So these people who we love on a soul level might come into the world and do something really horrible. It might be the husband that dumps you and takes the kids, right? It could be a colleague at work that stabs you in the back over and over, but they're there for a reason. And when I learned this, it made so much sense, and it answered so many questions that I had about different people that were in my life. And why were they in my life? Because it was a struggle. So I love that theory. And I bank on that theory.
Yeah, right. And it really helps you understand more of, what's going on here, that it's already kind of been set up and taken care of, and that there's reasons for things. There's meaning to things, even if they're not quite, you don't understand them. So now, as I went along, and as you grow in your expansion of allowing divine love to keep pouring wisdom into you, and this is why it's so important to stay in this relationship, that you're allowing and open to what you're hearing. Well, and I will tell you that I heard a lot of things that I didn't like. I didn't think was funny. I didn't understand it, and I was trying to understand it through my ego rather than really understanding, letting go and saying, I don't understand this, and it's okay. It's okay that I don't understand it. I'm just going to take in what I'm being taught, and I'm just going to keep taking it in, and eventually someday it made sense to me. But I spent a lot of time also fighting what I was hearing, as if I knew better. So that was an interesting experience too. I didn't want to hear some of the things. I thought it was too woo-woo for me. I'm like, this is woo-woo. I don't want to go there. But as I went along, then Jesus started to teach me that actually this illusion has been created for us. And it's like, okay. So the wisdom starts to shift as we go along. And as you are ready to hear more and understand and take it in, you're given more. So then I'm told that God is the writer, the author of the story. God is the producer, director, the actor. God is playing all roles. So now, as we grow in our wisdom, now we're starting to see the oneness. We're starting seeing that God is you. So I went from spirit, I'm spirit, just having this experience, right? And then we are, sorry, I had all these pop-ups come up on my screen. Okay, so now we're moving into oneness, the idea of oneness. And you're being taught that God is expressing itself through you. Divine love is you, that there's no separation. And as we are going along in our journey, and because we've been so steeped in the earth illusion, it is very difficult for us to accept this, right? We're talking about accepting our divine blueprint, that this is the divine presence that we are, that nothing else exists. And so then what I get told, so I'm explaining all of this as I went along, so you know that there's a process in this. So the next thing that I was told was that given this great myth, and it was interesting, I was writing a book with Susan Frink Anderson, and both of us writing about this great myth that we've been given. And it's much more expansive and metaphysical. So now what comes is that God created this great illusion for us to have a fun experience. And as itself, as divine love. So the illusion is that we're sleeping, it's as if we're dreaming. We're dreaming that we have incarnated into a human, which is sort of similar to the first story. But he says that he created out of energy, because everything is energy, is unconscious energy. And unconscious energy would be ego. It would be all the stories of our lives, all the stories of history. It is all the faulty beliefs that we have about ourselves, all the patterns of thinking that are faulty about ourselves that help us create this humanity. That's a lot to take in, huh?
It is a lot to take in.
Uh-huh.
It makes, what came to my mind was, if all of us are God, are image of God. I mean, when I sit in meditation and I'm with God, I see God and I turn around and see God in me, right? So that's kind of how I envision that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think, okay, so if that's the case, we'll take someone in the public figure that a lot of people really don't like right now. And what's the purpose of God coming in that form?
Mm-hmm. Great questions. That's a great question. And I'm sure a lot of people think that way and have their own ideas and beliefs about it. So through this, this ego consciousness, or people call it darkness, or they'll call it lower level thinking, lower level consciousness. It is like a veil of unconsciousness. And all that exists is thought. And that's hard enough to wrap your head around, right? That all we are is thought. It's sort of like there's a consciousness thinking and creating. And taking that in can be really difficult. And until as you start going along, it starts like, yeah, I understand this. Everything that I see outside of me is a projection from thought within me. Okay. So, like I said, this unconscious energy, soul print energy, and it has all the stories of our lives, all our family patterns. It carries all of the lives that we've lived before. It's all filled with stories, and that actually helps us develop a persona, because divine consciousness does not have a persona. Okay, divine love is everything. It is, and it's a state of joy and being. It's not a feeling, it's a state. Okay, and so it doesn't need anything, but to have this experience, it needs to take on a life of its own. And that's what the role that we call ego plays in it. It gives us personality, gives us energy to do things, it gives us desires. Divine love doesn't have desires. So this is all for our entertainment experience. And I know that's hard to hear when you've gone through some difficult things. And that's why you must be in a relationship with God to help you understand, why did you experience those things? Because me telling you that is not going to help you. This coming from the source of your life is what helps you understand these things. So now we've started living this life, and we have stories about us. And a lot of it is victim bully consciousness. And we all within us have the victim bully. You think about your ego, or we're calling it your ego, but it is a consciousness. It has nothing to do with the truth of who you are. All you are is divine consciousness having a dream. You are home, you are in love, you are it. So everything outside of that thought, everything outside of I am love and I am limitless and I am well-being, anything out of that thought is the consciousness, the ego consciousness, unconsciousness, the veil that is dropped down to make you think that you are having this experience. So we develop all of these adaptations to start protecting ourselves as we experience life. And we have all of these traits that we were given that are necessary and part of God's plan for us. It developed our personality. There's nothing wrong with any person at all. And so we have the victim bully inside of us. Who doesn't have an inner critic? Who doesn't have ego thoughts? Do you know anybody like that, Ruth? I don't.
Who has no ego thoughts? No.
I don't. It's just part of the experience.
Right.
So we have this victim and bully consciousness going on in our mind. We can look at it, we can say it is our higher self or God, and the ego consciousness always in conflict, right? Ego wanting its way because it believes that it's real, and we've given it power all of our lives because we've listened to those thoughts, those inner negative thoughts about ourselves and other people. And so that starts developing our character. So if you're looking at maybe a political figure that you were talking about, we're just seeing an outer presentation of our own internal dynamic. And we're seeing it because it needs to be cleared. And we're seeing it so vividly because we need to stop believing in that consciousness. We need to stop allowing that negative influence of the unconscious thinking, this soul print energy, ego thought process, to have to stop having influence on us and believe that we are only goodness. And so when that fight stops within our own self, you're going to see more and more reflection of it on the outside, that you'll see of it happening less. But we're also in this together as a collective consciousness. Even though we're just one, it is part of the illusion that we're all separate from each other, when it is only one consciousness. So if I am constantly hearing somebody repeat back to me what is going on in my mind. I am constantly hearing my thought process being spit back to me by somebody else, whether it's positive or negative. And so I will have my own ego thoughts. It'll come out of somebody's mouth and be spit back at me. And I will be, and it's funny because when our ego hears that somebody speaking its own thoughts back to itself, it doesn't recognize itself. So it gets appalled, like, how can you say that? Oh my God, that is just awful. But if you listen to your own mind, there is always this tape, this underlying tape that's playing that is always beating you up to one degree or another. Okay? It is constantly bullying you to get you to do what it wants to do. And it's also an illusion, but we listen to it. So that is why I believe that we're seeing this on the outside. Does that make sense?
Yes. Can you give us an example of what you're talking about how what we're thinking is coming to us from somebody else's mouth?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I hear it. Well, I hear it from you. I hear it from my husband. I will just have a thought. And when you are in a state of presence and awareness, and you've been hearing what goes on in your own mind or what you've been thinking about, you all of a sudden, somebody will be talking about the same thing, and it can be in the context of their own life. Okay? So they will be talking about it, maybe about their own self or an experience that they had, but it is the same thing you were thinking. So there is only one consciousness, and we are all sharing each other's thoughts to one degree or a next. It's in there. So this is why we try to put love out there so much. So my husband, I could be thinking something, and my husband will walk in the room and say exactly what I was just thinking, that I never spoke out loud.
So, question, is there any chance that that's just because you're intuitive or he's intuitive?
Nope. I believe it's because we share one consciousness. And if you start listening to people's stories, and the further you get into awakening and not, attaching to certain stories anymore, then you hear less and less of certain things. Okay, but you're going to hear stuff that are beliefs, like all kinds of stuff about illness over and over again, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. These are all the beliefs that circulate within the consciousness of the collective, and it's in your mind. So if you believe in stuff, you're going to hear about it over and over and over again, and it actually is bringing you contrast to say, why do I keep hearing this? Do I need to believe it? So like an example would be, there's so much victim bully consciousness, and I talk about it like in a triangle where in the triangle, there's a victim at one angle, a bully at one angle, and a rescuer at one angle. And what we're doing is actually running around the triangle all the time in our own mind too. We're going through a bully victim rescuer process between the ego creating something, feeling like a victim, and now it feels guilty, so I need to go now rescue somebody else or myself because of what I thought or what I did. So we are playing out patterns over and over and over again. And what's really interesting, so this is all, we're all energy. The illusion is energy. All the stories are energy. And we keep bringing that pattern, the story, back over and over again with different people, different eras, until we clear believing in it anymore. The more we detach from that story and the belief about ourselves, like a lot of rejection and abandonment. I don't know anybody that doesn't feel shame, guilt, rejection, and abandonment to one degree or another. And so you will keep having stories come up in your life, things happening, so you can feel it within yourself of what needs to be cleared. So your feelings are important in that way because it's telling you, okay, this is something that I need to look deeper into. One of the things that I remember a few years ago, I was having an argument with my husband, and I felt so angry and hurt, and I went in my bedroom and I'm crying and I'm yelling at the same time. I'm so angry and frustrated, and Archangel Uriel pops up with Jesus, and I experienced Uriel as a female, and she said to me, "Deb, there's nothing happening." And I said, "Don't tell me there's nothing happening." I know what I just went through. And she said, "It's not real, it's an illusion. And there's nothing happening. You are fine." And I really had to sit back and say, okay, this is how we get drawn into all of these stories in our life. And so if I believe that I have a victim bully relationship from home, okay, because that's what I experienced, then I have brought it into my children, my relationship with my children, my friends, my coworkers, my husband. And it took me probably the 5 years to see how thick it was in believing that for some reason I'm a victim. And I've been a bully too. I've been both, like we all can be. And so when I realized that, oh my gosh, I keep projecting this into my relationship, and I don't want to do that. And I don't believe I'm a victim anymore, because God helped me understand that I am not that, and that there's no truth to that. And as soon as I really started to accept the fact that I am worthy of having awesome relationships, loving relationships, wonderful relationships, it shifted. And it's incredible. And it is because my thinking, my perception shifted of myself. But this is what our journey is about. This energetic storyline keeps circulating in our lives and patterns, and it is up to us to stay present and aware enough to shift them. And we do that by stop believing it. And you cannot do that without God. You cannot do that without the help of divine love helping you understand who you are at every moment, because you keep forgetting. How about you? Do you go through that too?
You know, I do. One of the things that you've been talking about reminds me of the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
That if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you think is, today's going to be a terrible day, you can guarantee today's going to be a terrible day.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's your perception. It's the energy that you put out there, because like energy attracts like energy.
Mm-hmm.
So we just get a whole fistful of it coming right back at us. Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing that as an underlying tone of what you're talking about here.
Yeah. So you can apply it to your whole life, because everything's just a pattern, and your thought process. All we are is thought. and you're painting a story every moment of the day, and you're getting to choose. That's your free will, is your perception and your action, how you react to things. And the more you react to things, the more you get more of that,
Right.
because that's the energy that you're putting in it. We're here as energetic, as energy, as thought, and learning that we have so much power inside of us to create a beautiful life, which is already there. All that exists is perfection. Part of our growth is accepting that and learning that and integrating it and allowing our thought process to think in those terms versus fear.
Right. Can I give you an example of that, Deb? So
Yeah.
I remember before, I've got two teenage daughters, and I remember when they were younger, and I would think of their upcoming teenage years and kind of go white knuckled, right? Oh my gosh, all I've heard is horror stories about teenagers. And I remember talking to one woman, and she said, I loved my kids as teenagers. It just like every day was better than the next, and every age was better than the next. And I thought, oh, wow, that's an option. And, and then I went into it with every age is going to be better than the next.
Uh-huh.
And I can tell you, I love my daughters as teenagers. We've never had so much fun with them. But I think had I continued to go into those years white knuckled with, oh, this is going to be horrible. Oh, they're going to hate me and I'm going to hate them, it would have been completely different.
Mhm. You are so right. That's a great analogy. That's a beautiful analogy because people understand that, because that's the story that's out there, right? That's the story that circulates in the unconsciousness, in the collective illusionary world. So yeah, so you shifted that, and then you get to have a whole different experience, and so do your kids, right?
Right.
And it's so beautiful. So we have the ability to do this all the time. Now imagine when we're unconscious, which most of us are, and even as we're awakened, we're still waffling in and out of unconsciousness all the time. It's just amazing. The veil is down. God says, okay, I'm going to show you a little something. I'm going to pull the veil up, and you're going to go, wow, oh my gosh. And then whoop, there it goes again. So you get longer and longer periods as you go along of presence, but the veil's always there. So imagine all the things that we've learned from our family, from history, that we play out in our relationships that don't need to be there.
Right. Right. I mean, I'm thinking of someone who had their parents a lot of fighting. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the modeling that they saw for relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
so this person got married and thought, well, that's what relationships look like. You fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be that way. I remember the first time I heard Barbara DeAngelis talk, like I think it was the 90s, and she was talking about love, and that what we try to do as people is we recreate home, because that's what we know what love was, whether it was functional or dysfunctional. And so that's why you end up having marriages like your parents until you decide to make some different choices. And that's no different than what I was saying, is I had conflict the whole time in my family, my parents, with each other, divorces. And so for me, the imprint of that story was, I'm going to have conflict in my marriage. I'm going to have conflict with my children. And until I started to understand that I'm carrying this story forward, and it's not true, it's not real. I can have beautiful relationships with everyone, but I also need to grow and expand my heart and expand my mind and allow myself to be taught by God all of these things, because I can't do it by myself.
Right. Right.
Nothing transforms you like divine love. Nothing.
So, Deb, I'm a writer for TripAdvisor. When,
Uh-huh.
when I say I'm a writer, I give reviews. They
Okay.
don't pay me. Um, but when it was time for me to choose a name to be seen as under that, I chose Kind Traveler because that's how I see myself. I don't want to put information out into the world that isn't kind or helpful.
Mhm.
And so, and every time I write a review, I think, okay, what would Kind Traveler say? And it just gives me that little shift.
Mhm.
And if you see yourself as divine love, then you go into a conversation and you think, okay, what would divine love say?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's wonderful because you are being taught all the time through divine love, right? And it's cultivating you into knowing who you are, that you are divine love, and you're thinking about it. You're intentional in your thoughts about things rather than just going into the ego consciousness, the illusion of like, oh, I'm gonna write this or that. And so it is being more intentional with your life. But saying that, I do want to say to people that regardless of what is coming out of you, whether it's ego consciousness or you're more heart centered, you are perfect in every single moment because God is moving through you as you. And so you can't say that, oh, I'm being bad or wrong or this or that because your God is making those decisions. This is another understanding of like you are not making any of these decisions by yourself. You are not moving by yourself. God is speaking through each person all the time. What comes out of your mouth because God created both consciousness for us to experience, right?
So, where would you go with someone who does a heinous act,
Hmm.
murder? Would you say that that's God acting through that person?
Yeah. And it's where that person is in their journey. And I don't understand it. I may not like it, and it's okay. But I've been taught not to judge it because I don't understand that person's journey. Archangel Raphael did a lot of work with me in not judging. First of all, not judging my own self. Not judging myself because I'm judging because I had an ego thought, and that starts a whole cycle of guilt within you. So it is about not judging yourself and not judging other people because you don't understand the expansiveness of what your journey is about, or anybody else's for that matter. And he said, I want you to look at everything as a flavor of ice cream. Every person that you see, every act that's done, and sometimes when you see something that you don't like or you think is wrong, I want you to see it as a flavor of ice cream that you don't like and just say, I don't care for that. I don't want you to sit in judgment of it because the ego sits in judgment. And the ego thinks it knows everything. It does not know or understand the expansiveness of what God's role is in each person. That person could be contrast for us of like, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't like that. My integrity says I don't want to do that. So that person just could be adding contrast in your life. So you don't know the expansiveness of infinite intelligence. And every time we try to figure things out of how things work, why somebody's doing this, why it's happening, you have to keep going back to trusting God that everything is in divine order and that you don't know everything. And it's purposeful because you wouldn't be having the experience that you are. And nobody knows everything. You don't understand infinite intelligence in this state of what we are in this illusion of this um, you want human or whatever you want to see yourself as. So it is important to just keep trusting and having faith that everything's in divine order. And when you have an understanding that it's a dream, it's not real, then I don't have to keep sitting in judgment all the time. And it's a process because we go in and out of judgment all day long. You don't have to attach to it though. You hear it, and okay, I can let that go, or I'm going to hold on to it and I'm going to see it as something wrong. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing is absolutely perfect.
You know, Deb, it's so interesting hearing all of the things that you're saying. And I'm looking forward to next week because I think some folks are going to be calling in next week. I would love to hear their questions and I
Mhm.
would love to hear their comments. So,
Mhm.
any of our listeners, please be watching next week and take advantage of being able to call in to Deb and ask her questions like I'm asking her today.
Mhm. Yeah. And like I said at the beginning, this is my truth. This is what I have been given. And so you might take parts of it that say, oh, that sounds outrageous and I can't go there, which I did a lot when I first started to hear things from other people and from God and Jesus. So, or you might say, well, that makes sense, or I'm understanding this. Uh, it's all good. It's okay. Whatever your reaction is to it. And that's why I ask you to write and to take notes, because then you can go back and explore your feelings about these things, your thoughts about them, and then take them to God or whoever you connect with spiritually, whatever you call divine love, and ask them to help you understand your truth.
Yes, yes. And Deb, if folks want to contact you and bounce any questions off of you, how do they contact you?
Sure, you can find me at debbiengoldberg.com. You can find me on Facebook at Deb Goldberg, and you can also message me on Facebook.
Great. So with that, we need to wrap up our day today. But Deb, thank you so very much for being here with us. I love the conversation that makes you stop and think. So
Mhm.
that's fabulous. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you.
To all of our friends over on Facebook and YouTube Live, thank you for being with us and join us again next week for Divine Relationship Recovery with Deb Goldberg. Thank you.